Hi there. Welcome back to Thousand-Year-Old Vampire, the story of Mr. Pendleton, formerly Clovis Ravenor. That's as much of a welcome for you all as it is for me. I have thought very little about this character over the past week. I went on that binge one day, got consumed by the game, and then affairs in life, like the winter storm this past weekend, just took over and drained the creativity, and even whenever I had the time, just didn't consider this. In part because Clovis, Mr. Pendleton, is a monster, and I'm in no rush to come back here to what horrid thing he'll do next. Part of his monstrous nature, the prompts themselves. The very framing of Thousand-Year-Old Vampire. But maybe I didn't have to escalate things so hard in the process of pursuing these murderous, violent, or callous prompts. But I did. And here we are. We ended on prompt 60. We had 360s in a row by the looks of things. But the shift happened with prompt 54 that I spent a full half hour considering. It just careened my mind to a halt, considering what I'd just done with the prior prompt, and I was slow to consider, or like a way that to move forward from it. Richard in the comments provided a couple suggestions for how, you know, how I could have handled it. Adri Raven noted the alternative prompt section of the book, which I had not flipped through. It's in the appendices. I had gone to the later appendices to like get examples for character creation, but hadn't read any of all the alternative prompts. Why don't we actually do that right now? That's prompt 54. Let's see how that would have been for us. This page. Prompt 54. A group of mortals discover you and treats you like a god. How do you fail them? Huh. Okay. I'm doing my best, my poor vision being what it is, not to look at any of the other prompts. Though I don't see myself ever exploring these, in large part because that would require me to do another run of Thousand-Year-Old Vampire. I don't know whether I have that in me. Back to the character sheet. So yeah, while in the shower this morning, it is a very early Friday morning for me, I started thinking to myself, with all the natural disasters that were happening in Charlestown around the time, I figured that, and not to mention the other things that had happened, like the failing of the first settlement, uh, probably the mystery and intrigue surrounding this figure, uh, of some, like, distaff noble lineage, of peculiar hours and rumored behavior, and a Catholic, seemingly so. Could have spun that without advancing decades of time. There's a, there's an avenue where, the people see these attempts to help and figure that, like, Clovis is a curse, a blight. Mr. Pendleton is just, like, he's bad luck. Or maybe he's a sorcerer or warlock of some kind, dooming them all to this fate. Can't be trusted. But then we get to how fearful people are, and maybe they aren't, like, sufficiently motivated to mob up and go after him, yeah? A lot of shit's happening in the region. Time. Again, disaster after disaster. Not enough wellness. Can't even, like, a mob can't even rise up. Perhaps folks still remember decades back the stories of the Indian raid that hit the manor home. And perhaps no one's really confident that even in a group they could take this man. I couldn't say. Haven't given that much thought. Just alternative means for how we could flex that. But we ended up taking it as just him being... He didn't even, like... Where did I write that down? Okay. The onslaught of disaster striking Charlestown has the people desperate for aid, and I utilized my considerable experience with medicants and physiology to garner recognition from John Locke himself. Obviously there, Clovis has something to gain. Not just doing this out of compassion, much as he did back when he was a human. Yet there are still humans here who resent me, who dare to reject my goodwill despite their inferiority. And here, we're clearly playing into the idea that Clovis considers himself a superior being, that he is evolved. He's more than human. And, in response, and like, out of resentfulness, he becomes a predator in plain sight. Which is right there. That's where we got that skill, right? Yeah. Convert an old memory into a new skill. Clovis Ravenor is no longer. Now, something else, introspective, Tinkerer, we can thank for this. The prompt 60 asks, who was arrested in your place? Create a mortal character if necessary. And I just, like, chucked out there Samara. Like, not only is she arrested, she's fucking dead. Just made sense to me. Like, how would she not be dead? But the book explicitly says, let me find the page here, on characters. It's the final paragraph. Occasionally you will realize that a mortal must have died of old age. This might happen every 4 or 5 prompts when it does strike out the character's name. Outside of this, characters cannot be killed unless a prompt tells you to do so. Now, she very well may have died of natural causes by now, but that specific event would not have killed her. For the time being, I'm going to uncross her and move her back up here. She still sacrificed herself, but she suffered a punishment. That wasn't death, and it wasn't exile, but it wouldn't have been imprisonment either, whether it was the loss of some extremity, or horrid lashings, combined with Mr. Pendleton paying a fine. Certainly a fine for the actions of his native mouthpiece of irrelevant heritage. It doesn't matter. I frankly don't want to think about it that hard, either. It just, that's a reality. As a side, if, I've made some changes to the microphone setup moving forward, so I'm gonna come across as a little quieter. You may not even notice, depending on your aural sensitivities. I also did make mention it was early in the morning, so I may sound lethargic. I'm probably lethargic. Still, we're here, and we're gonna tell creepy shit together, I fucking guess. So there's that. We have this extra memory slot courtesy of some sort of freedom beauty thing, and the final 3 prompts were all 60. Training from someone getting arrested in our place, to someone being executed for a crime that Mr. Pendleton committed, to an entire class of people being blamed for the crimes Mr. Pendleton committed. I don't recall whether I wrote a... I'm pretty sure 5 is what I wrote. Yeah. I'm also seeing a lot of wretch language here. Part of the projection and how I was taking Clovis just, how dare you? Fine. Fuck y'all then. Just leaning further into that superior mentality, and also some frustration at the prompt and how I just hard veered in a direction I was slow to adapt to. I have two mortal characters to create. The first one I am going to create is going to be an individual by the name of Matthew Eldridge Carolina emissary to Native American tribes. Foolishly believes I am not to blame for their plight. And then, the next name will be Magistrate Samuel Parr of Charlestown. Magistrate, whatever. Let's not think too hard about it. Does not care. Doesn't care whether the Kusabo are innocent of raiding Charlestown. And we need to uncross that. I believe that has satisfied what I have not done. I should probably mention them in the experience. But perhaps Mr. Pendleton doesn't care. At this point, early 1700s, 1710, 1720, I can't imagine Mr. Pendleton is going to be staying in Charlestown any longer. Probably should have moved sooner, but with recent events happening as they have, the natural disasters, to him being blamed, to all of this uproar and stir, he's been in the region for a very long time. It's time for him to go. And I think given the frontier rugged lifestyle here, he's going to take on a more nomadic life. Traveling, such as it is, up and down the eastern seaboard, offering his services as a skilled apothecary and trained physician and slave breaker. Not that that's a skill, but he is the director. And he is very good at handling people. An occupier as well, for what the skills have given us that have been used, expended. They are like that's just part of, interwoven into the very fabric of his being. I have accidentally minimized something I should not have. Let's try not to do that anymore. I have many untapped skills. It is a plethora. Some of these I'm more reluctant to use. However, given what we've already done, how much worse could Mr. Pendleton become? Right? Yeah. And we still have a number of resources. The medical tools, the servitors of the lineage, concoction of ineffability, arcane manuscripts, the diary, and a notarized letter of recommendation from John Locke. How useful any of these resources will be, really, I couldn't say. We'll see where the story takes us and what might best fit in. I'm trying to I'm like going over what he's all forgotten, and now what he's all put in the diary. It's through the diary alone that he remembers the thing that should not be, and the concoction of ineffability. It's also through the diary that he remembers the specific experience of how he came to slay Edward VI. He has forgotten the moment of his turning. Has he forgotten? Okay, he needs the diary to remember him falling asleep for a century. But he does remember leaving Rome, doesn't remember how he got to Rome, except that he fled London. Okay. Just want to get a grasp of where Mr. Pendleton's, like, what his headspace, like, broadly is going to be like. Obviously, he remembers far more things, but it's just this particular shit. You know, day-to-day, not just day-to-day affairs, but big picture. Okay. I think it's enough for this whole rambling thing. Wow, that, looking at the time there, that took a while. Gonna be a lazy river meandering here. Let's see if some prompts wake us up. The Inquisition, let's begin the Inquisition. Look out, sin, we're on a mission to eat all the flesh, to eat all of the flesh. That's forward 5. That's gonna take us to 65, yeah? Alright, 65. Let's go. Too far. There we go. A possession turns out to have financial value as an antique. Trade your oldest resource for 2 contemporary resources. Okay. Well. What the hell? What do I do with this? I know what my oldest resource is. It's the medical tools. Apparently, must be some sort of fucking, I don't know, antiquarian. Fucking Benjamin Franklin collects them. I don't... It beats me, right? As Mr. Pendleton hits the road. Yeah, I mean, it's no choice here. It's the medical tools. That is my oldest resource. There's nothing else. Wouldn't it be some shit that was like my fucking servitors? How the fuck would I even do that? Alright, 2 contemporary resources. So what would I give this traveling vagabond, Mr. Pendleton? What would he garner? What would he gain? So one of the like gains should probably be contemporary resources would be a financial like wealth. Based on his travel, I should say that's probably like in a good of some kind. And if I'm going to say that it's a probably like an antique collector, probably like a British antique collector. Yeah, over here in the colonies, looking for business opportunities, perhaps like a silver. Silver, yeah, silver's the one that comes to mind. Like, the fur trade's picking up, So it could be that. Silver comes more readily to me. So, we'll say one of the contemporary resources is sparkling silver jewelry. Is that contemporary? Define contemporary. Can we call that contemporary? I mean, it belongs to the same period of time. If there's anything Sid Meier's colonization has taught me, is that, there is a desire for silver to be mined and sold back to the homeland. What's the other wine? Like a thoroughbred, a horse of some kind? That'd be weird. Horse would die. I'd just like lose the resource. Yeah, like that would be how that would go, right? Would my character even value a horse? Because I gotta think about that too. Like, what the hell would he value for giving up his beautiful medical tools? Would it be a new home somewhere? Huh. Well, we've definitely left. Is he just gonna settle down instead of traveling a frontier? Be a stationary resource. Okay. Where do you want to put him, Grimith? Uh, Philadelphia, New York, Boston? Hmm. Not Jamestown. I want to call it like a Boston apartment? Yeah, so much for hitting the road, right? Yeah, let's make one of these resources stationary. That also actually gives us, say, a stationary resource, so we have something to, like, lose if, we have to abandon a stationary resource. So Clovis hits the road for... Mr. Pendleton hits the road for a few years, travels along the frontier, meanders up, and 1720s, he's in Boston. There's a prominent, like, English, like, fussy, like, noble asshole of some kind. Who fucking knows, right? Like, collector, like, dealer of some kind. Um, I don't know how much, like, a silver dealer makes sense, but he may have, like, that may also just represent what he has on hand. Why the fuck would he be so fascinated in these medical tools? I don't know. Rich people do things with their money, right? I, I don't have a great explanation. We'll just call it a well-kept home in Boston. There, well-kept. We can imagine, like, what that might be, like, what shape or form that takes. I don't need to define that. Yeah, stationary resource. I don't think that's illegal for me to do. It's a contemporary resource, fits the time, fits the locale. I'm allowed to make that stationary. It makes sense. Yeah. Cool. I have, I'm trying to think of how exactly this... Maybe I don't need to understand. That's just it. Like, this man's perspective and how he came to see these tools is so valuable. These fucking antiques that Mr. Pendleton insists on using. Still. Irrelevant. probably didn't trick him. Perhaps Mr. Pendleton noted that they were once owned by Clovis Ravenor? Yeah, he still remembers that. Still remembers English physician and alchemist. Yeah. And this guy may go like, oh shit, you mean the man who murdered Edward VI, King of England? How the fuck did you come to own those? How would you even confirm that? Maybe the vampire told a delightful story, and the collector didn't recognize the vampire as the person who murdered. Let's not think about it too hard. What are we forgetting here? Probably 5. He probably just... That happened? Was that a thing? I don't fucking care. That sounds like a them problem. While visiting Boston, I meet an English antiques dealer, and he becomes enamored by my ancient set of medical tools. I use the funds he gives me to bedazzle myself in jewels, in silver jewelry, and buy a home in the city, and settle down in the city. While visiting Boston, I meet an English antiques dealer, and he becomes enamored by my ancient set of medical tools. You know, fucking things are 250 years old. I use the funds he gives me. I trade them to him. I trade the set to him for sparkling jewelry, and use the remaining funds to settle down in the city. Okay. I think that works. This is not where I fucking... Huh. Okay. Yeah. Sure. What the fuck ever? Now in Boston, yes. Sure. Whatever. With jewelry. And a home. 5. We go to 70. That is 65, right? 65 plus 5 is 70. That's how mathematics works. Very good, Grimith. I'm proud of you. Mortals are cruel and work in ways outside your understanding. How were you mocked or victimized? Why was your response ineffectual and costly? Check a skill. Hmm. Mortals are cruel and work in ways outside your understanding. How were you mocked or victimized? Why was your response ineffectual and costly? Check a skill. So, Mr. Pendleton has some understanding of urban life, such as it is, being from, or having dwelled in Charlestown for the decades he did. He spent time, traveling, meandering through the frontiers, offering his services, before ending up in Boston, the 1720s. It's a different animal, Boston. Different set of immigrants, different values and beliefs, different attitudes. And so it makes sense that Clovis would have been ostracized. Now, I admittedly don't know Boston, despite its prominence and power, uh, as well as I do the city of Charlestown. I couldn't specifically tell you, for example, their attitude towards Catholics. Uh, many, many settlements uh, in the 13 colonies didn't much care for Catholics. Some were cool with them, some were super cool with them. Just, depended. Religious immigration was a big motivator. Hmm. All right, let's have a look at the skills we have. Forbidden lore, efficient slinker, streetwise, immortal physiologist, all flesh must be eaten, reluctantly skilled merchant, the wordless fear, wild hunter. It's none of my concern, and always have a scapegoat. I'm gonna say streetwise is the skill that makes the most sense here. An understanding of urban life. Or at least Clovis thinks it's an understanding of urban life. The skill came up when he was in England. When he first moved to London. That's when we got that skill. And for as much as he's buried like his attitudes, like he smothered like his original identity to blend in. Clovis's weird habits and his, like he's a night creature, a bit ravenous. Social mores escape him. You look at him and it's just you're unsettled by him. He doesn't smile. He wears glasses all the time. The the wretches here are as foolish as those I left behind in Charlestown. They ridicule my appearance and mannerisms without knowing how easily I would destroy them. Alright. Okay. Tells a story, answers that. That's the skill that's checked. That's what makes the most sense. It's Mr. Pendleton's attempt to, like, blend in with the city, and he's got to learn actually how Boston life works. And he doesn't know. It's a different region with different people. Wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round, round and round. Grimith is a little tired this morning, all through the town. We head back 1. That's 69. You bond with an ancient enemy character over your shared past, finding in it something more comprehensible than this modern world. Check a skill. You become friends. Share a resource, and gain a resource that is scared with you. An ancient enemy character? Well, huh. Okay. By this point, we'll handle this after the prompt. I'm pretty sure Samara is going to be dead. It will have been... Like, when did I create her? Gosh. Uh... uh... 40... Yeah. This prompt? Oh, she's... Fuck, man. Like... I wasn't passing through much time. We were just plotting slowly here, so... Certainly, like, she would have been later in life by the time this happened. By now, yeah, she's definitely fucking dead. Matthew Eldridge and Magistrate Samuel Parr aren't ancient, and they also aren't enemies. Which leaves us with the immortal thing that should not be. Oops, I have committed crime. Try not to commit crime, Grimith. It's awkward, I know you're like crime. I love crime. Do I want to put her... Let's put her here. And cross her back off. Yeah, the thing that should not be is the only ancient thing we have. And it's the closest we've got to an enemy as well. For when we last dealt with it, we blackmailed it. That makes sense. Okay. I actually good. I had to check OBS to make sure I was sharing this feed instead of still leaving this in the book. It doesn't tell me to create a character if one's lacking. Let me flip through the book here momentarily. Do I create a character if it makes sense to do so? If it makes sense to include a character when resolving a prompt, do so even if the prompt doesn't tell you to include a character. In addition, create a new character if a prompt instructs you to include one, but none are available. I have an available character, so we just use this. And it would make sense that the thing that should not be might consider Mr. Pendleton as an enemy, given the blackmail that happened some close to 200 years ago now, right? Okay. However, Clovis doesn't fucking remember this entity, except through his diary. But at least he does have the diary to remind him, right? Okay. Finding in it something... You bond with an ancient enemy character over your shared past, finding in it something more comprehensible than this modern world. Check a skill. You become friends. Share a resource and gain a resource that is shared with you. The skill I'm going to check here is a mortal physiologist. I will say that the entity came once more, seeking like aid, and hunted Clovis Ravenor turned Mr. William Pendleton down for this all over again. But far more prepared for any sort of bullshit, you know, Mr. Pendleton might pull given their last interaction with the blackmail. Uh, and as it turns out, Mr. Pendleton just relates better to this scientific monstrosity. Just doesn't fucking. He can understand it better than these inferior wretches who do not appreciate the sacrifices this superior being has made for them. You know, the cattle, the sheep, the meat, the food. Here is an intellectual equal, a different but superior being all the same, and it just. What resource do we share? Is it the concoction of the ineffability? Arcane manuscripts? That probably makes more sense than the servitors of the lineage. And I don't think I'd want to spend the concoction of ineffability here. It just wouldn't make. Like, it's the one who gave that to our vampire in the first place. I am trying to stay away from calling him Clovis since he has buried Clovis in his mind. But I apparently have not. The arcane manuscripts, yeah, that ties into a moral physiologist and how we might, like, bond and relate. So we will share this resource. I'm gonna interpret that as us striking it through. That makes sense. I gain a resource? Ah. It's not a skill, it's a resource. Hmm. Do I want to do something like fluidic again? Fluidic? Yes. Eldritch fluid? What the fuck does that do? Hmm. It's shared with us. What would it give as we share the arcane manuscripts with this thing that should not be? What would it have? A flesh golem. Yeah. Some other sort of horrid scientific monstrosity and abomination. Here, you have interest in these sorts of things. This minion of mine may delight you. I am curious to know what secrets you may unravel by studying it. It is yours to do with as you see fit. I have grown weary of its service, and where I am going, it could not aid me anymore. Tireless, ferocious, filled with blood. Yum. And this is shared with us. Yes. Like, I could put down, like, a knowledge of some assets or structures that are useful to your vampire or items that they value. Like, all the other things that else that I was thinking writing down are just, like, tied into, like, skills. A flesh golem is an asset. That's useful to this vampire. Let's put that down. A fucking flesh golem. Understood. I did not realize, you know what? Yeah, flesh golem. It returned to my life in Boston, and we bonded. I actually think this ties into Memory 5. It's shit that's happening in Boston. It's a location thing. One night, beyond my manor, I opened the door, my new home, to find a bizarre amalgam of magic and science. It knew me. Acted as if it knew me, and I knew in my heart. It's hard for me to, like, phrase this all into just one sentence. It knew me. It knew me true. It knew me, all I had done. And in our time together, shit. Ah! Too lethargic for this. Come on, Grimith, wake up. I was not prepared. I also need to put this in present tense. A bizarre amalgam of magic and science arrives at my new doorstep seeking aid. Calls me Clovis. And it calls me Clovis. And it calls me Clovis. And it professing to know who I am and what I could do. I confess, I barely remember it. But in my heart, I felt a kinship. The less feel a kinship I had not since Samara. I have not felt it. How the hell do I include the resources here? I don't know. Do I want to... You know, I don't think this fits an Experience 5. I think I gotta make a new experience. The more I think about it, the more I don't feel good about that. What do I want to forget and or put in the diary? I think I am not going to put 3 in the diary. I'm just going to forget that. Samara's dead. And all those things, just fragments of the past. Let's move this shit up. We don't move up 6. 6 remains on 6, given the devotion of that particular memory slot. And much as Memory 2 begins in the diary, bizarre amalgam of magic and science arrives at my new doorstep. At my doorstep in Boston. My Boston doorstep. Seeking aid. In Boston. I want to put, like... Doorstep in Boston implies that we have multiple doorsteps, right? So does my Boston doorstep. I think location's important for the memory. A bizarre amalgam of magic and science arrives at my doorstep in Boston seeking aid. The professing to know who I am, what I could do, doesn't fit there, given where the comma is. It professes to know everything about me. And I confess to not remembering it. To scarcely, to barely. While I do not remember it, I cannot shake feeling of kinship. Cannot escape the feeling of the kinship I know we share. I cannot deny a bizarre amalgam of magic and science arrives at my doorstep in Boston seeking aid. It professes to know who I once was. It professes to know everything about me. And while I barely remember it, this entity that single evocative sentence doesn't define the skill spent too much, nor does it define like the resources shared. How the fuck do I fit that in one sentence? Ah! Hmm. Is this where I I forsake the rule? I went pretty loose here with Memory 3. I really like that intro, like tying into like what's in the diary. Just like a memory loop. You know, just like opens the door like one rainy night. And it's not one of the servants, but just like him directly. And there it is, like straight out of the past. And like he stares. He like invites it into his home. They talk long into the night. And through the night as well. I barely remember it. I barely remember, but I cannot deny. No, we share. I want to make like just an ultra compound sentence with multiple interjections using an M dash. Fuck. Rewind. Maybe I'll workshop that memory some more, that experience. It should, like, include... Hold on, let me go back into the book here. Example experiences. We befriend each other over moments I barely remember. And in exchange for my knowledge and manuscripts, it offers me a servant. An eternal servant. A flesh golem. Okay. That'll do. I reckon. You bond with an ancient enemy character of your shared past, finding in it something more comprehensible in this modern world. Check a skill, you become friends. Share a resource and gain a resource that is shared with you. Okay. Yeah. Cool. We checked the skill. Mortal Physiologist. Crossed out arcane manuscripts that we shared. And we've got a flesh golem asset. Delightful. Do 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 do. Manum do 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 do. Manum do 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 do. 10 minus 6. That'd be 4. 69 plus 4 is 73, right? We agree on this? We confirm that this is so? Let's go to 73. You achieve a position of absolute stability that might sustain you unchanging until the sun dies. What does this mean? The game is over. What? I don't fucking know what that means. What does that mean? Well, it means the game is over. Okay. Sure. The game's over. Alright. Huh. You achieve a position of absolute stability that might sustain you unchanging until the sun dies. What does this mean? The game is over. Gosh, you reckon that like the solidifying of the interaction with the thing that should not be, hardening the like the background of the skill of the immortal physiologist, that all of the experiments Mr. Pendleton has been performing on himself over like the decades and centuries, like pays off? He achieves a breakthrough, perhaps? Perhaps within the blood golem, uh, perhaps within the concoction of ineffability, perhaps within his forbidden lore, perhaps within the time and access he has to things here in Boston, with the wealth he has gained from his antique tools paying out in incredible dividends. I don't fucking know. I, the game's over? Okay. Alright. Out of curiosity, if I didn't want the game to be over, I'm gonna flip down to the alternate prompts. Looks like those start after 80, and all these, like, normal ones at the end are game enders. I'm not reading, like lengthy into, like, the text on them, but the game's over and there's no, like, other prompts, like, down beneath them. It's just, like, a singular one. Okay, so, hypothetically, if I were to do, like, a 74, 73, 73 in this book, the next fresh blood you drink makes you horribly ill without a cause that you can find. Check a skill to avoid being caught off guard. Okay. How further down do these prompts go? 135. And then there we go to our random number tables if you don't actually have dice on hand. And then the non-verbal affirmative consent tool adapted for solo play, which is colored oddly, given how this book is rendering the printouts. Appendix 4, which covers like a series of Q&A about like how Tim Hutchins like developed it, suggestions for how group play could work, and then play examples, which I leaned on for creating Clovis Ravenor. It's the rest of the book, by the way. Okay, so I guess what I'm gonna ask myself is, do I want Clovis' story to end here? Do I want Mr. Pendleton's story to be done? Let's not flip carelessly through the book and the prompts. I might read some shit that maybe I don't want to read. You know, I have to give this some broader thought. I don't know what it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to. I spent some time thinking about this one. I wasn't. I wasn't keeping in mind like the idea of like a page count, like when the first appendix began. I presumed that we would run into prompts which ended our game, as, like, it's noted in the rules, like, that. I hadn't prepared for this, though, that I would be here right now. I'm, like, looking back through the prompts list. Feels like I flew through here, but I really didn't. Like, I blazed through the 20s and 30s, but I stayed in, like, the high 40s for a good while. And then we had 3 prompts, like, a row for 60. Okay. Yeah. What does it mean for Mr. Pendleton to achieve a position of absolute stability that might sustain him unchanging until the sun dies? That means his body won't deteriorate anymore. He won't fall into torpor. His his brain and memories perhaps solidify. Maybe he becomes more feral. Like it's understandably going to be a part of like his research experiments bearing fruit. I well, awkward note to end on. I don't mean like the prompt itself being awkward. I just I need a longer breath of time than I can take for this video. So I tell you what, we're gonna end here. Why don't we have a group think? What do you all think? Um, we had a good stopping point here. How do you think this takes shape or form? Are we not at a good stopping point? And does that mean we transition into alternative prompts? This seems like a good stopping point to me. I'm just... Yeah. Just trying to shape how this looks in my head. From a pure skill and resource perspective, though. Fuck me, man. I have 8 unchecked skills. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 like untapped resources, one of them being the diary. I have 1 skill I lost. I have 9 check skills. This vampire has done a fuck ton. In how many prompts? 4, 8, 12, 18, 22, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36 prompts? Big Dick Pendleton here. Yeah. Kind of stalling out here. Just fucking blindsided. Not frustratingly so, as what happened with me last time with 54. Just a phrase that I invented that I come to like. Pleasantly baffled. Yeah. Um. Feedback? I'll certainly do another video after this at some point where, if we end our vampire story here, I keep saying, like, inclusively R. It's the royal we, you understand, though perhaps with your input, maybe it does become that. I guess solidifying what the fuck this means, and then my thoughts on Thousand-Year-Old Vampire. And I guess if I don't end, Grimith now looks at the dice. Just to make sure. That's a 10. That's a 6. That's 4. 69 plus 4 is in fact 73. Good. Then I guess I'll go to an alternative prompt. It looks like the alternative prompts go into the triple digits. And I can keep going there. Yeah, we got some time left in history. We haven't even gotten to the American Revolution yet. I know some stuff still before we'd enter future time. 1,000 years old. With how crunched I've been keeping these prompts. This character's 300. So it goes, right? I've rambled and meandered on enough. Y'all have your homework. I have mine too. We'll meet up soon, okay? Take care. Hugs and kisses. Try not to be a monster.